has dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID, and that the Powerpuff Girls are just her other personalities. It's said that her older brother bullied her, which caused her DID, and this older brother would then be manifested as Mojo Jojo in the main series. Blossom represents the girl Brenda wanted to be. She wanted to be a mature and level-headed girl, and had an ego to boot. Bubbles represented her soft and bubbly side, and she also symbolizes the innocence and submissiveness that Brenda had possessed in reality. On a few rare occasions, however, a bit of her aggressive nature would be manifested in Bubbles, and as a result, Bubbles is often shown as being rather feisty in the main series. Buttercup is then her aggressive side. Buttercup was created from Brenda's thoughts of retaliating against her older brother, and Buttercup ultimately represents her dissatisfaction with her life. However, despite Buttercup representing her violent side, she is still shown as having hidden depths to her character. Now, these depths, however, are mostly reserved for the Bubbles persona. Number 5. Bob's Burgers. It's said that Bob is the only living member of his family, and the reason the other characters are present is because Bob is having a psychotic. As seen in season 1, episode 1, the restaurant is reopening for the 4th time, following a series of tragic accidents, which are seen briefly in the opening of every episode. With each accident, one of his kids dies. However, Bob loses it beforehand with Linda's death. After Linda died, Bob opens the restaurant and decides to have it near the funeral home because he can't let her go. This lack of acceptance leads to him hallucinating Linda around the restaurant. Furthermore, Mort, the mortician, frequents the restaurant because he is aware of Bob's delusions and wants to check in on him. Bob then further loses a grasp on reality with the loss of his kids, and he descends into madness. Number 4. Scooby-Doo. There is a theory saying that since the first Scooby-Doo cartoon started in the late 60s, it was set during the Vietnam War. Now, because the army was drafting teens at the time, the gang was forced to run away from home to relocate to Canada to avoid being drafted and going to war, which explains why in every episode they're always driving in their van with no clear destination. Shaggy is your typical hippie with a case of the munchies, and being against war, he decided to take his dog Scooby on a road trip in protest. Fred Jones is a military school dropout whose draft number was up, making him AWOL. Daphne is Fred's high school crush who can't bear the thought of Fred leaving and possibly dying in the war, so she joins the gang to be with Fred. And Velma is an anti-war activist who decides to join the gang on the road trip. And honestly, this makes sense to me. Number 3. SpongeBob SquarePants. Nickelodeon's official synopsis for the show states that Bikini Bottom in the town of SpongeBob SquarePants is actually part of real-life Bikini Atoll, specifically right underneath it. Why does this matter? Well, because Bikini Atoll was actually a testing site where the United States set off nuclear weapons in 1946 just to observe their effects. One bomb specifically was detonated underwater. Now, the resulting explosion was photographed, and every explosion that happens on the show, which happens in basically every other episode, is the exact replica of the photographed explosion. Now, this would explain why these sea creatures have come to life and why we see a walking sea sponge interact with an entire town of wacky undersea creatures. Number 2. Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. The classic cartoon Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote consists almost exclusively of Wile E. Coyote chasing Roadrunner through a deserted landscape over and over and over again. Now, the theory is that it's less likely that these two are alone in the desert playing a game of chase, and more likely that Wile E. Coyote is in his own personal hell. Considering how many times Wile E. Coyote gets blown up, or that massive ACME anvil falls on him, and how many times he keeps coming back. One Reddit thread took it even deeper, comparing the cartoon to old Greek and Native American myths about hell. They said there are 2 reasonable answers to be drawn from comparative mythology. The more obvious was that he was some form of glutton, and that this torment is meant as cosmic irony. This helps explain his frame, as well as his obsessive fixation on this one source of food. The more interesting explanation comes from another Greek myth about horrible eternal torture, and a northwestern American Indian myth. Prometheus stole fire from Mount Olympus and gave it to a mortal man, and in return the gods chained him to a mountain, and he had an eagle rip out his liver every day, only to have it magically restored in order to be ripped out again. In Karuk Native American mythology, it was a coyote who stole fire from the mountaintop. Match these 2 myths together and you get Wile E. Coyote stole fire from the gods, and is therefore eternally tormented by a bird, aka Roadrunner, on a mountainside. Yeah, that is dark. And coming at number 1 is Pokemon. Pokemon has been on television